Hi, everyone. This is S.J. Thomason with Truth Matters at Christian-Apologist.com. Right here, we've got a question being asked by Bart Ehrman, who says Mary was a virgin. He's being interviewed here by Megan Lewis of Digital Hammurabi. And there's a lot of talk about Mary in this particular video. And so I figure, being the month of August, and August 15th is the feast of the Assumption of Mary, it would be an appropriate time to discuss the Marian doctrines: the Assumption of Mary, the Immaculate Conception, Mary's Perpetual Virginity, and Mary as the Theotokos, or the Mother of God. But before I do that, we'll listen to what is being discussed. This is an atheist here, agnostic. Over on the right is Bart Ehrman. I don't know, Megan, I think might be a cultural Christian, but I'm not so sure of that anymore, but here we go.
From what you're saying, the virgin birth was not necessarily an original or necessarily as important in early Christianity as it has become in modern Christianity. It doesn't appear in Mark and John, and there are reasons to believe that those authors thought that Joseph was Jesus' father. When do we think the virgin birth did become a central tenet of Christianity, and why do you think it became so important?
And so this is just guesswork, but I would guess that if Mark knew about a virgin birth, he probably would have said something about it, or if Paul knew about it, he would have said something. We don't, maybe not. But I think the common way of figuring out when it came into existence was that it sometime after Mark wrote his gospel and before Matthew wrote his. So maybe in the 70s or 80s, people started saying that he was born of a virgin. And
so, of course, he's packing in the assumption that Mark was written first. I know some Protestants do believe that Mark was written first, although Matthew was positioned first, and the early church fathers had placed Matthew first, then Mark, then Luke, then John. But before we get to that, let's talk about the evidence from the Bible in the virgin birth. When the angel Gabriel appeared to Mother Mary and announced that she was going to be pregnant with the ruler of the world, essentially, what did she say? She said, "How can this be, since I know not man?" In other words, she knows not man, and she didn't intend to know man. She was betrothed to Joseph. She would not have asked, "How can this be?" because she would have known, of course, as a young woman, when if she were to consummate the marriage, that's how it's going to be. But she said, "How can this be?" because she had taken a vow of perpetual virginity. Now, this is played out. We see that. But let's go back and let's talk about some of the very important Marian dogmas, where they came from, who originated them, who signed off on them, and did they just pop into the air out of nothing? Okay, so on All Saints' Day, November 1st of 1950, Pope Pius XII declared that the Assumption of Mary is an official dogma of the Catholic Church, which means that the dogma is infallible and approved through the Apostolic Constitution. At the end of the Blessed Virgin Mary's life, God took her into heaven, body and soul. The Feast of the Assumption is celebrated in the Catholic Church each year on August 15th. What convinced Pope Pius XII of the truth of this dogma? Well, on October 30th, 31st, and November 1st of 1950, he witnessed the miracle of the sun, which, as in Fatima on October 13th, 1917, the sun appeared as an opaque sphere surrounded by a luminous light, which danced in the sky, moving from left to right. Following his declaration, the Pope witnessed the sun dancing mode again on November 8th of 1950. So God basically shone down to the Pope that what his decision was about the Assumption was correct. It was correct to make it a dogma. That's one of several Marian dogmas. Another is the Immaculate Conception of Mary, which Pope Pius IX proclaimed as a dogma of the faith in 1854 on the same day we celebrate its feast, December 8th. Mary was conceived free of original sin. This dogma was confirmed shortly thereafter when the Blessed Virgin Mary appeared multiple times to Saint Bernadette in Lourdes, in France, in 1858, declaring, "I am the Immaculate Conception." Of course, she said that in French. Christopher Columbus was a staunch believer in Mary's Immaculate Conception, as were many people hundreds of years before this declaration. When he sailed to the Americas in 1492, he named his vessels after Mother Mary: the Nina, or girl, the Pinta, the painted one, and the Santa Maria. Another Marian dogma is Mary's perpetual virginity, which was first confirmed in 553 at the Second Council of Constantinople. In 649, Pope Martin I of the Lateran Council affirmed that this was dogma, which means that she was a virgin before, during, and after Jesus' birth. This dogma was affirmed very early on by Ignatius of Antioch, who lived between 35 and 110 AD, Justin Martyr around 150, Irenaeus around 170, and Jerome in the 4th century. St. Jerome wrote a book in response to the heretic Helvidius in the 4th century to condemn his views and affirm Mary's perpetual virginity. There's much evidence, as I've just pointed out, in the Bible itself. But these are all taken together, so let's consider these together. The fourth one I want to discuss is the Theotokos, which is another Marian dogma that says Mary is the mother of God, or the God-bearer. Mary is the mother of Jesus. Jesus is God. Therefore, it follows that Mary is the mother of God. This dogma was affirmed at the Council of Ephesus in 431. Some have claimed we have little ancient support for Mary's assumption into heaven, yet this doctrine may be the most obvious when one considers biblical passages starting from Genesis and ending in Revelation, specifically Genesis 3:15, where her seed was going to crush her seed would crush his head, the Satan would reach for her ankle. And then also in Revelation 12, where you have the woman appearing in the sky, clothed with the sun, with the moon at her feet, with a crown of 12 stars. That, of course, refers to Mother Mary, because she gave birth, this woman, this queen mother, gave birth to the ruler of the world. So consider that Mary, and Justin Martyr, other people have said this. In the Bible, St. Paul says that Jesus is the new Adam. So it follows, what's the question? Who is the new Eve? From Adam's rib came Eve. From Mary came Jesus. You see how it kind of reverses. So the new Eve was virginal and had a perpetual virginity, and she brought forth Jesus. And so you can see how that was reversed. She also, if in Revelation 11, just before it makes reference to the queen mother of the ruler of the world, it talks about the Ark of the Covenant, because Mary is the Ark of the new covenant. Consider the sacred nature of the Ark of the Covenant in the Old Testament. It was built of the acacia wood, which was covered inside and outside by the purest and finest gold. It was only carried by righteous Levite priests, as any and only Levite priests were permitted to touch it. Anyone who had not been permitted to touch it would die. You can see references there from Numbers 4:15, 7:9, Exodus 25, 12-14, as Uzzah died when he touched it. It contained the tablets of the law, or the 10 Commandments, Aaron's rod that blossomed, and a golden urn of manna. Manna is the bread from heaven, and it sustained the Israelites. Now consider that Jesus came down and brought the law. He didn't come to destroy the law. He came to fulfill it. He also consolidated the 10 Commandments into love the Lord above all else and love your neighbors as yourself. But of course, he did not say that we shouldn't follow the 10 Commandments. Of course, we should still follow the 10 Commandments. And if you talk about St. Joseph is always pictured in statues with a rod that blossomed, because it was very similar. Aaron's rod had blossomed. St. Joseph also had a rod that blossomed. And Jesus is the bread of life, reminiscent of the manna, the bread from heaven that sustained the Israelites. In 1 Corinthians 11, 27-29, Paul states, "Whoever therefore eats the bread and drinks the cup of the Lord in an unworthy manner will be guilty of the body and blood of the Lord. A person should examine himself, and so eat the bread and drink the cup. For anyone who eats without discerning the body eats and drinks judgment upon himself." So imagine Mother Mary would have to be completely free from sin for Jesus to be within her womb, because that would go against his very nature. And so his nature, his divine nature, going into her womb. Now, these highlight the way that the bread and the blood of Jesus and the Eucharist are very sacred. And to put a sacred divine being into Mother Mary would require that Mother Mary also had a certain level of she was very sacred herself. And that's why when the angel Gabriel appeared to him, he basically announced, "Hail, Mary, full of grace." Okay. And so he said that with a Greek word that kind of surprised Mother Mary. She was taken aback a little bit. Also consider the phenomenon of microchimera. Microchimera is a scientific term for the cells that remain inside of a mother's body after giving birth to the baby. So Jesus' cells would have remained inside Mother Mary, his divine and human makeup. Really interesting stuff. Also consider that in the ancient times, the kings always had queen mothers, especially because the kings often had hundreds of wives, especially like Solomon. So you'd have Mary is a queen mother of Jesus, the king, just like the queen mother of David was Bathsheba. I'm sorry, the queen mother of Solomon was Bathsheba, and the queen mother of God, Jesus, in heaven. So we have those kind of pieces of evidence. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you like, subscribe, and do come again. And just remember, whether you eat, drink, or whatever you do it all for the glory of God. Thank you.